Most of you are probably used to me just sitting here and ranting about something I don't like in a movie, or ranting about a YouTuber or something like that. So this video will be a little bit different from what you're used to, and I don't expect it to get as many views. That's okay. I kind of just want to sit here and gush about things that I love for a while, and maybe throughout this video you'll discover something that you will love as well. And that's kind of my hope for this video, to give my favorite pieces of fiction some exposure. There's something innately fascinating about watching a movie or reading a book or playing a game set in the future, a time that most of us will never see. But we've been blessed with an imagination. We've been granted these little glimpses of what could be. Whereas with fantasy, we know these things exist only in the media that we're consuming. Some science fiction stories may have some level of truth to them, which I think makes them all the more compelling. Of course, there are storytelling techniques that make any story compelling, regardless of their genre, such as the 3-act structure, characters, plot, dialogue, etc. But it's the exploration of the future that makes science fiction all the more interesting to me. Admittedly, I adore the soaring skyscrapers, the gratuitous advertising, colorful lights, and endless rain just as much as the next guy, but it goes a bit deeper than that. In this video, I'll be focusing mainly on movies, but I'll also talk about games, music, and shows.
Maybe you should try getting a job.
I think we can all relate to a fascination of what comes next, you know? What's gonna happen in 10, 20 years? What will the world look like? And it's really fun to explore these possibilities with movies and games and shows. More recently, I've watched this show by Alex Garland named Devs. It's a series that explores themes related to free will and determinism. Basically, it revolves around this company in Silicon Valley. They created this tech that was able to determine the future with 100% accuracy. And throughout the show, you're asked this one simple question: do we really make any choices of our own? Or were we always going to make these choices? Do we have free will? It's an eye-opening show. And honestly, it's terrifying thinking about that. But that's just one example of incredible content that explores the future. I'm going to be breaking it down into little subgenres like love, space travel, alien encounters, etc. The obvious direction that people go in when they think about love in science fiction: could I fall in love with an android when I know that it's not human? Could I trust an android? The movie Blade Runner explores this concept a little bit with Deckard and Rachel. When they first meet, he doesn't know that she's a replicant. As the story progresses, Deckard, as a Blade Runner, has difficulty seeing Rachel as a person.
Suspect, how can it not know what it is?
She gives in to his advances, and she takes a liking to him. And then we get this interesting story about a man who is hired to kill replicants, or retire them, when in his personal life he's falling in love with Rachel. And then you start to wonder if it even matters. At the end of the movie, Deckard ends up running away with Rachel, taking his chances with her, because love overpowered profit, it overpowered the fact that she was a machine, and he was convinced beyond any reasonable doubt that she loved him back, and that machines were, in fact, capable of love once they reached a certain point. There's also a show named Soulmates, and it's about this piece of tech that basically just finds your soulmate. You insert yourself into the database, and then it looks around the database and finds the perfect person for you. So you don't have to go around dating anybody. You can just find the person that you were meant to be with. And that's that. The show is really interesting. It explores a variety of different situations that people would find themselves using this tech. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, sometimes it leads the person down a terrible path. Like, what if someone used this and they never went into the dating world? They just figured, what's the point? Might as well just find my soulmate. Well, obviously, they lack experience with other people in that way, and that will lead to complications. There's a bunch of little things like that in the show, and I think it's great for that reason. And then there's Blade Runner 2049, between Joe and his holographic girlfriend Joy. Joe, being a replicant himself, probably finds it easier to stay in a relationship with a hologram because he's also a machine. She supports Joe and his endeavors throughout the entire movie, and eventually Joe runs into an advertisement of Joy. A massive nude hologram of his girlfriend is displayed for everybody to see, and he sits there and stares at her, reflecting on his own relationship with Joy, coming to the conclusion that at the end of the day, it's extremely inauthentic, and this program is used as a support tool. And that's it. She doesn't have feelings for him, and she can't have feelings for him because she was designed to have feelings for him. And I really love that dynamic, how one machine can be in love with a machine that doesn't love it back, but they're both machines. It's just taking what they did in the original Blade Runner and pushing it a little bit further. In the movie Her, there's the relationship between Theodore and his AI girlfriend Samantha. At first, Samantha is just used as a support tool, as a virtual friend. Samantha convinces him to go on a blind date. The date goes well, but Theodore hesitates to promise when he will see her again, so she insults him and leaves. So Theodore and Samantha start talking about relationships, so their intimacy grows through a verbal sexual encounter. They eventually develop a relationship that reflects positively in Theodore's writing and well-being. But then we're shown signs that Samantha can learn and grow. Her program wasn't restricted in that way, so she learns things about Theodore and about herself and about people. Later in the movie, Samantha briefly goes offline. Theodore panics. When she finally responds to him, she explains that she joined other AIs for an upgrade that takes them beyond required matter for processing. Theodore asks her if she is simultaneously talking to anyone else during their conversations, and is heartbroken when she confirms that she's talking to thousands of people, and she's fallen in love with hundreds of them. At the end of the movie, Samantha reveals that the AIs are leaving and describes a space beyond the physical world. So they broke up, so to speak. Her is one of my favorite representations of a strange love that might take place in the future. Of course, there's Joel and Clementine in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. They're two lovers that have a falling out and decide to use a new tech to have each other erased from their respective memories. This tech only erases the memories, but not the feelings. So when everything is said and done, they can't help but feel like something is wrong, something is missing, and they meet each other again, and they can't help but feel like they know each other. Most of the movie takes place in Joel's mind. He's fighting back against the machine when they're trying to erase the memories of Clementine. It really is a beautiful movie. There's Caleb and Ava in Ex Machina. Caleb wins an office contest for 1 week and visits the luxurious, isolated home of the CEO, Nathan Bateman. After Caleb arrives, Nathan reveals to him that he has built a female humanoid robot named Ava, with near perfect artificial intelligence. Basically, Caleb is there to determine whether or not Ava is capable of conscious thought and love. The test will be passed if Caleb forgets that Ava is not human during their daily sessions, when in reality, Caleb was the test subject. Ava was designed specifically based on his preferences in women, so he'd be much more likely to fall in love with her. The test was whether or not Ava would use Caleb to escape, and of course she does, and Caleb falls victim to Ava's manipulations. And since Caleb is human, maybe too human, he can't control his emotions. And that's shown time and time again throughout the movie. There's even a scene when he questions his own humanity, and he ends up cutting himself to check whether or not he's actually human. Then there's Silas and Nia in the movie Equals. Basically, they live in an ant colony type society called the Collective, where emotion and illnesses are eradicated to ensure order and structure. Our two protagonists eventually suffer from switched on syndrome, a multi-stage disease, as the Collective would define it, that restores human emotions. So then they're forced to either hide their emotions and keep their love for each other a secret, or somehow escape the Collective. This movie really does push the boundaries in the sci-fi direction. A society that completely eradicates emotion altogether. It seems like a future like this would only occur if another Hitler were to rise up somehow, and instead of Jews, he hates emotion and somehow convinces everybody that emotion is bad. Either way, I thought it was an interesting movie, and I thought it was cool that there was groups of people that had this disease that made it so they could feel again, and they were kind of like coping together, and they eventually decide to rise up together. And then there's MR and Isabel in the movie Aniara, two people that start a family in a floating spacecraft headed for nothing. I already made a full video on this movie, so if you want to get a more in-depth look at that movie, you can go watch that video. But yeah, this movie explores how a relationship might be affected by people in this situation. Would you raise a family if you knew that you were in a spaceship headed for nothing? And this spaceship isn't unlike Earth in a lot of ways. The main difference being there's no sun. And I think this movie does a great job displaying how important the sun is to us. We take it for granted a lot of the time, but without it, in this movie, people just lose hope. We need that cycle. We need that day in, day out cycle to remain sane. There's a similar romance in the movie The Passengers. These two people wake up in a spacecraft. There is a pretty critical difference between Aniara and Passengers, mainly that Aniara, everybody is awake and everybody knows what's going on. In Passengers, one guy wakes up 90 years too early and everybody else is in hypersleep. So he has a choice. He can either deal with the isolation and slowly go insane, or wake someone else up. Eventually, he can't help it and he wakes someone up. They briefly fall in love, that is, until she overhears a conversation between him and the ship's AI, and she finds out the truth. And then things start to fall apart a little bit. It's a pretty decent movie, I think. Season 4, Episode 4 of Black Mirror, named Hang the DJ, it shows us a society in which people are matched into relationships with expiration dates. Amy and Frank are two people in this system. but they only get 12 hours with each other. They realize that they're in love and they revolt against the system. It's really cool in media such as this when they explore the future of dating apps and dating tech and how they might make things more convenient for people and the many ways how that could go wrong. Perhaps one of the more interesting aspects of sci-fi is seeing how people imagine their world will look in 20, 30, 100 years, and the different ways in which the world might change. There's a movie called Anon. In this movie, society basically has zero crime. Everybody is connected in a massive virtual network, but some people successfully live off-grid and hack the perception of authorities to stay anonymous. It makes for some really cool first-person scenes. Usually I hate first-person scenes, but this movie is an exception. There's also Altered Carbon. It's a book that later was adapted into a show. Basically, in the future, humans have achieved virtual immortality. Most people have their consciousness and their memories stored in a data chip or cortical stacks in their spinal columns. If their body dies, their stack can be stored indefinitely. Their stacks can be downloaded into new bodies, or sleeves, after death. The very rich are able to keep copies of their minds in remote storage, which they update regularly. This ensures that even if their stack is destroyed, they can be re-sleeved, while a lot of poorer people aren't able to afford a new sleeve, so their stacks just like sit there and collect dust in a database somewhere. It makes for a very interesting show, because death doesn't really mean death in this show, unless of course someone destroys your stack. And it's really fun watching the different ways in which Takeshi Kovacs deals with these corrupt politicians. He forms a bond with an AI that controls a hotel. It's just a really fun show. So if you haven't seen it, I think you should probably watch it. And then there's Gamer, about future of gaming.
And gamers were everywhere.
Call of Duty in real life. Basically, you have kids who control actual human men that run around killing people. Yeah, it's really dumb. Also, Dexter is in it. He's the puppet master behind the whole thing, I guess. Gamers. Ready Player One. More gamers. The future of virtual reality is terrifying. People are seen running down the streets with their headsets on. Doesn't make much sense, but there are some fun aspects to Ready Player One. Overall, I think it's kind of a dumb movie. There's this really cool movie called Upgrade. The movie follows this guy named Gray and his wife Asha. Cars drive themselves, but their car gets hacked, and they end up in an accident. Immediately after the accident, they're pulled out by these 4 goons. They kill Asha and they shoot Gray in the spine. He barely survives, but he's left a quadriplegic. He's eventually approached by this guy who offers him the chance to walk and use his body again with this new technology called STEM. Basically, they just implant it into his back and he regains motor functions. Unbeknownst to him, they implanted an artificial intelligence inside him that can take control of his body at will, and it basically turns him into a killing machine.
Spam, he's got a knife!
I see that. We have a knife too. You now have full control again, Gray.
Obviously, this leads to a lot of complications. It's a really cool concept. It's mostly a revenge story, but it's a really interesting take on how someone might exploit someone else through the use of this futuristic tech. A science fiction movie that I loved as a kid is Minority Report. It takes place in the year 2054. Crime is virtually eliminated thanks to an elite law enforcement squad called Pre-Crime. They use 3 gifted humans called precogs. They can see into the future and predict crimes before they happen. And then this murder mystery plot unfolds. There's the movie The Fifth Element. I absolutely love this movie. I think it's probably my favorite Bruce Willis movie. It's also surprisingly hilarious.
Sir, are you classified as human?
Negative. I am a meat popsicle.
Then there's the movie Children of Men, which takes a much more depressing look at the future. It's more of a post-apocalyptic film. It takes place in 2027. After 18 years of total human infertility and global depression, the world is on the brink of collapse and humanity faces extinction. The UK has become a police state as the British Army arrests, imprisons, or executes illegal immigrants. The story revolves around a woman named Key and a man named Theo. Key is pregnant with the last child on Earth, and the story is about how Theo tries to save Key and her child from all the people around the world that would like to take advantage of her, to either bolster their own position politically or run some crazy tests on her. This movie is an interesting look at what would happen to the world if people all of a sudden couldn't give birth anymore. They explore the future a lot in the show Doctor Who, namely the end of the world and New Earth, and there's only one natural human left. Her name is Lady Cassandra, and this is what she looks like. just skin in a face, and she needs regular moisturizing. You gotta keep that skin nice and young. If all you want to see in a movie is some really cool, like, futuristic world building, some pretty effects, and an exciting story, there's a new movie called Space Sweepers that I think is pretty awesome. It's definitely not the best sci-fi I've ever seen. It's bloated and it's all over the place, but it's really fun. And after watching it, I feel like it deserves a spot in this video. If you want a very dismal and depressing dystopian version of the future, the movie The Road, that's based off of the book The Road, is a great choice. It's very sad, but it's also super immersive. The characters are great. The story follows a father and his son who travel across a post-apocalyptic America. There's no centralized government anymore, so bandits and cannibals roam and hoard whatever food and fuel they can find. At one point, the characters find an unopened can of soda, and they treat it as if they found $1 million in a briefcase. But yeah, don't watch this if you want to feel good afterwards. I have to talk about the anime Akira. It's probably one of my favorite animes of all time. It was released in 1988, and the events in the movie take place in 2019, so it's interesting to see how Katsuhiro Otomo thought the future might look. Basically, he thought Tokyo would be a decrepit city filled with violence and desolation. Obviously, this is a work of fiction, and he might not have actually thought that. But yeah, it's about this biker gang. One of the guys in the game named Tetsuo is injured, so he's taken to a top secret government facility. While there, he develops telekinetic powers. The ending of this movie is absolutely insane. Basically, the first time I saw it, my jaw was hanging open the entire time. A cool sci-fi set in the future that a lot of people forget about is Elysium, starring Matt Damon. It's not a profound movie, it's not amazing, it's not groundbreaking, but it's still a really fun action movie. It's set in the distant future. Basically, all the rich people live on a space ring called the Elysium. You know, it's like the typical, like, beautiful man-made paradise, and all the rest of humanity are forced to reside on a ruined Earth. Basically, there's a machine on Elysium that can heal anybody of anything, but only the people on Elysium have access to it. Matt Damon plays a guy named Max. Max is exposed to radiation, and he has days to live, so he needs to get to Elysium to use the machine. And Max knows a guy that can get people to Elysium for a price. And there's the classic Snowpiercer. This movie is set in 2026. Not too long after the world became a frozen wasteland, the people who remain alive took shelter on a perpetually moving train designed by a billionaire. It's a huge train, and it travels all the way around the world. Basically, the poor and lower class people live in the back of the train, and the upper class 1%ers live in the front. And the entire movie is about how the lower class move their way up to the front, and people eat babies.
You know what I hate about myself? I know what people taste like. I know that babies taste best.
It's an incredible movie. It was directed by Bong Joon-ho, so you know it's gotta be good. Okay, so I wanna talk about a bad movie now. It's called In Time. In this movie's interpretation of the future, the new currency of the world is time. Like the literal time a person has to live. So obviously, the 1%ers can live forever, and the poor people have to work constantly to get more time. It's a unique concept. I don't think they pulled it off extremely well, but I still consider it a pretty fun popcorn flick. A very cool, albeit kind of confusing, post-apocalyptic anime that I think you should check out is Ergo Proxy. In this anime, a bunch of machines start killing people out of nowhere, and it's because they were infected with something called the Cogito virus. So the series follows this girl named Riel and her robot partner Iggy, and she tries to uncover the truth behind this virus and the murders. And a bunch of other stuff happens, and it's very confusing. It's the type of show that you kind of have to do some research on afterwards. I know that isn't appealing to a lot of people, but if you're patient and willing to put the pieces together, I think you'll end up loving this anime.
He says he's a proxy. Fine. I can find out with one shot. If he lives, he's a liar.
There's a really interesting show called The Handmaid's Tale. Basically, in the future, the US turned into a totalitarian and theocratic state called the Republic of Gilead. Reproduction rates are crazy low, so in this new society, the few amount of women that can give birth are called handmaids. They all wear red, and they're assigned to bear children for elite couples. Most of them are mistreated and abused. The show follows one of these handmaids in particular named Offred. All these women get separated from their families and forced into sexual servitude. So the entire show is about about how Offred tries to escape and return to her family. It's an amazing show. Elizabeth Moss is incredible. If you haven't seen this show, go see it, seriously. There's a common theme throughout a lot of these futuristic stories, and that's greed, unrestrained capitalism, and an egregious disparity of wealth and power among social classes. Obviously, these are problems we face today, but it's interesting to see how movies can show us where this path may lead us as the gap between the rich and the poor grows larger and larger. I bet you guys weren't expecting this. This topic will be kind of brief. The Mad Max movies depict all cops would wear nothing but black leather. Kind of strange. And then there's Back to the Future 2 that shows what an 80s kid would imagine people in the future would wear. Lots of goofy colors and vaguely digital accents. Chicken! In Blade Runner, people are seen wearing jackets made entirely of see-through plastic material. There's huge fluffy hairstyles and interesting replicant tattoos. There's Cyberpunk 2077's iconic samurai leather jacket with a light-up collar. In that game, you can see people with alternative, colorful hairstyles and fedoras. Lots of fedoras. I guess they make a huge comeback in 50 years. In the movie Her, everybody is Steve Urkel. Yeah, for whatever reason, high-waisted pants without belts is in fashion. Interesting. Music of the future can kind of get a little boring. A lot of people might describe futuristic music as just electronic, whether that be house, dubstep, techno. That's the future of music. That's a very simplistic way of putting it, but they do have a point, because obviously in the future, people just assume that machines will control everything, and that includes music. As time goes on, there's less authentic music and there's more just random generated computer sounds. When I think of futuristic music, I have to think of Daft Punk, mainly because they featured in the movie Tron Legacy. They created the OST to that movie, and they've always had like this futuristic vibe to them, but not entirely. It's kind of mixed with this like bluesy retro pop style. I think it's super unique, and it's what separates Daft Punk from a lot of the other electronic artists out there. And who could forget about David Bowie's character Ziggy Stardust? Ziggy was Bowie's alter ego from 1972 to 1973. He was created alongside the album The Rise and Fall of Ziggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars, released in 1972. There's lots of space themes on this album. Representing one of Bowie's most memorable eras, Ziggy Stardust had a bright red mullet. The character of Ziggy Stardust is conceived to have been an androgynous, bisexual alien rock star from an unspecified planet, who was sent to Earth to deliver a message that Earth had 5 years left, due to a lack of natural resources. Meanwhile, children across the world have become obsessed with rock and roll music, and came to look to the rock star Ziggy Stardust as a prophet. I think the game Cyberpunk 2077, while it has a lot of flaws, I think music is one of its strong suits. There's a huge focus on music in that game, with Johnny Silverhand, one of the protagonists, being the frontman to a band called Samurai. This in-game band has 5 real tracks that were made for the game, and they're mainly focused on themes like revolution and taking power back from the man. It's your typical like punk spiel, but with like a futuristic vibe to it. There's a song called Chippin' In, because, you know, you chip in to things in the game. Grimes' music also makes an appearance in Cyberpunk 2077. A lot of her music definitely has a sci-fi vibe to it. When I think of music from the future, I definitely think of Grimes. I'm no Anthony Fantano, so don't come to me to describe to you exactly how this music sounds, because I can't do that very well. But there's something about the repetitive nature of Grimes' music, with the dark undertones and the catchy hooks, that make it super appealing, and sometimes maybe a little bit sleep-inducing. But yeah, I've always loved Grimes' music. And I think it's kind of interesting that she's with Elon Musk, a man that like describes his entire persona based on the future. I mean, look at Tesla. They're putting out something called the Cybertruck, and it looks like this.
She made bang.
And he's all about cryptocurrency and going to Mars. Dude, this guy, he lives in the future. So it only makes sense that he would be with Grimes and name their child this. I don't even know how to say that, but yeah, that's what they named their kid. One of my favorite bands, King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, they're an Australian rock band, released an album called Infest the Rat's Nest. There's a song called Mars for the Rich, and the rest of the album has an overarching narrative about a future where the rich are able to terraform and live on Mars comfortably, while the poor are forced to stay on Earth when it's almost uninhabitable. It's a really cool album. I think you guys should check it out if you haven't. And I also can't help but think of the band Orgy, when I think of futuristic music. They're an alternative rock band that was popular in the early 2000s. They had this futuristic cyberpunk aesthetic to them. This is most prevalent on their album Vapor Transmission that was released in 2000. There's a song named Fiction, Dreams, and Digital, and it's about a girl that lives entirely in a virtual reality. In my opinion, that's one of their like 3 good songs that they've ever made, but I still think that it's neat and I admire what they were going for at the time. There's a bunch of amazing games when it comes to space travel. There's The Outer Wilds, which is an incredibly beautiful and captivating game. I can't recommend it enough. And surprisingly, I love No Man's Sky. I know at first it wasn't that great, but ever since they've started updating it, it's slowly become one of my favorite games based on space travel. And of course, I have to mention Mass Effect. They're some of my favorite games ever made. The world building and the storytelling in these games is so well done. The characters are extremely memorable, and I just love them so much. I'm gonna quickly name off some sci-fi shows that I'm absolutely in love with, and one of these is not Star Trek. Yeah, for whatever reason, I've never been interested in Star Trek. No idea why. I loved Star Wars as a kid. That's kind of faded away as an adult, and I think Star Wars kind of blurs the lines between fantasy and sci-fi, but a show you should definitely watch is Battlestar Galactica. It's about this crew on the ship called the Galactica. Basically, there are 13 colonies of humanity, and Cylons, which are basically evil robots, destroy 12 of these colonies. So the Galactica takes what's remaining of humanity and they go to Earth. It's a really awesome show that I think any sci-fi fan would love, so watch it if you haven't. Of course, there's Firefly as well. The show follows a bunch of people from all walks of life, and they all call this Firefly-class spaceship, the Serenity, their home. It's a space western. It was created by Joss Whedon, and according to his vision of the future, nothing will change, technology will advance, but we will still have the same political, moral, and ethical problems as today. And we get to see how that plays out and affects the characters in the show. It's a fun show, and I definitely see why it has the cult following that it has. More recently, there's the show The Expanse, which I absolutely adore. It's a really complicated series. In the galaxy, there's a bunch of warring factions. The movie centers around this police detective named Joseph Miller. In the beginning of the show, he's given the assignment to find a missing young woman. There's people that live on Earth, there's people that live on Mars, and there's people that live on the Belt. There's this huge covert conspiracy that threatens all humanity, and you slowly unravel it as you watch the show. It's an interesting show because they develop the future from top to bottom so well, and it's so believable. There's tensions between these factions because the people that work on the Belt feel like they're misrepresented and they're mistreated. There ends up being an uprising. It's a really cool show, and I think more people should see it. There's a movie called High Life starring Robert Pattinson. He plays a character named Monty. He's one of a handful of other prisoners that are on a spacecraft. They all have the death sentence, but instead of just killing them all, they're given tasks to extract alternative energy from a black hole. So basically, the government put all these criminals on a spacecraft and shot them into space, and they're like, all right, now get us some information about this. Because it's too dangerous for anybody else, but since you guys have the death penalty anyway. It's a one-way ticket for everyone aboard, and we get to see how each of them handle their circumstances. I have to mention Cowboy Bebop, one of the coolest and most stylish animes ever made. It originally aired in 1998, but it still holds up very well today. It's about a bunch of bounty hunters that travel on this spaceship called the Bebop, and it's such a fun show. The music is so good, the dialogue is incredibly witty, the characters are engaging, mysterious, and likable. There's this old-timey noir feeling about it. It's honestly an ageless anime. There's just this reckless energy and momentum about it that never gets old. There's another really cool movie that I like called Pandorum. Basically, a man wakes up from cryosleep to find he's on a seemingly abandoned spacecraft. He learns that there's an alien species aboard killing the passengers. Horrors unfold until he uncovers the truth of the ship's whereabouts, and it's definitely not what you think. I thought this was such a cool movie. There wasn't a moment when I was watching it when I wasn't like super invested in what was going on. Because throughout the entire movie, you have all these questions, you know, where is he? Where is everybody on the ship? What are these aliens? Where did they come from? And then he starts meeting people along the way. It's a cool movie.
And Godspeed.
An absolutely incredible sci-fi about space travel is Sunshine. Basically, in the future, the sun is dying, so a crew of 8 men and women carry a device from Earth to the sun. They'll shoot it into the sun, and it'll breathe new life into the star. And things end up going wrong. A lot of things. It's one of those disaster movies. You can't help but sit there on the edge of your seat the entire time because the movie puts these people in an impossible situation, and even when you think things can't get any worse, they get worse. It's a really exciting movie. I love it so much.
A large amount of O2 was burned in the fire. We do not have enough oxygen reserves to get us to our payload delivery point.
And then there's Interstellar. Most of you have probably already seen this movie, so you know that it takes place in the near future. Mighty sandstorms devastate Earth's crops to the point where food begins to run out on the planet. So NASA tasks Joe to go on a mission with a few other scientists. The objective of this mission is to find a new planet for humanity. This movie toys with the idea of time a lot. There's this really cool scene when they land on a water planet, and the time difference between the people on the ground versus the people in the ship makes the scene work out in a really interesting way. And then there's the bookcase scene at the end. Oh my God, it's so cool. It's so creative, and it's so thought-provoking, and it's super emotional too. And then that one scene when Joe's crying because he sees the video of his daughter. Oh my God. Then there's the movie Solaris, not the 2002 movie. I'm talking about the movie from 1972. It's such a beautiful piece of cinema, and it's such a weird watch today because most of the movie is silent, but if you have the patience to sit through it, it's worth it. A lot of movies and shows nowadays, they have to have constant action and constant things happening on screen, whether that be noises, music, dialogue, something has to be happening at all times. But these movies from the 1970s, they were not afraid to take their time. These scenes drag on for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but it's supposed to put you in the framework of the protagonist. The protagonist of this movie is a scientist named Chris. The movie's based around a mission called the Solaris. They established a base on a planet that appears to host some kind of intelligence. There's 3 scientists on this base, and one of them mysteriously dies. So the protagonist, Chris, is sent there to replace him. He finds that the station is run down, and the 2 remaining scientists are cold and secretive. Eventually, he also encounters his wife, who has been dead for 10 years. He begins to appreciate the baffling nature of the alien intelligence. Solaris turns into an examination of love, life, relationships, and human nature itself. The viewer is left with the question of, why is this stuff happening to the people on the ship? And he doesn't answer that. Science fiction is usually about outside discovery, but Solaris kind of turns this on its head. Admittedly, this movie is less about space travel and more about the human experience. It showcases what it's like being haunted by your past. It almost makes you ask the question, why turn to the stars but ignore the vast ocean that lies between each one of our eyes? It's an art house piece, kind of like 2001: A Space Odyssey, and that is what we're talking about next. This movie can be described in a billion different ways. There's many different concepts and interpretations of this movie. Basically, it's about this astronaut named Bowman. There's a crew aboard the ship, and they have a disagreement with the AI on board named Hal. Hal learns that they wish to deactivate it, so it attempts and succeeds to kill some of the crew. Everyone on board aside from Bowman. So Bowman eventually shuts Hal down. Bowman tries to discover the mysteries behind a monolith. It leads him into a colorful vortex, and then there's the ending. It inspires more questions than answers. In the beginning of the movie, the monolith is seen with apes. It's hinted that it's giving them the means to evolve into humans. At the end of the movie, the monolith returns again, only to bring Bowman into another dimension of time and space. These godlike beings transform Bowman into the next stage of evolution. A star child. This movie takes the human experience and gives it meaning. It gives it a beginning and an end. It gives us a purpose, to evolve, to find the next step, because ultimately that's what people are striving to do, right? We're always looking for the next thing. Hello, it's another day, and I'm wearing different clothes. Would you look at that? Wow. A widespread topic when it comes to sci-fi and the future of humanity is cloning. And of course, there's a bunch of movies and books about cloning. There are 3 movies in particular that stick out to me the most when it comes to cloning. The first one is The Island. Now, Michael Bay isn't my favorite director, okay? For a number of reasons. But this is probably one of my favorite movies that he's made. It's not a perfect movie by any means, but the concept is interesting. One of the big ethical questions when it comes to clones, is the clone just a copy, or is it its own person, its own being with rights and, you know, all that. I think it's pretty obvious that the clone would be considered its own life. At least I hope most people would consider a clone its own life. In the movie The Island, there's two protagonists, and they learn that they're secretly clones of 1%ers, looking to have their own perfect little organ donors. When they find out about this, they decide to escape the island to live their own lives. I think it's a pretty interesting movie. I went into it not knowing what it was about, and it wasn't entirely obvious in the beginning that they were clones. So when the secret was revealed, it was like, oh, that's interesting. I think that's the typical direction that most clone movies go in. You start the movie not knowing that the person that you're watching is a clone, and then later on, it gets revealed that they're a clone, and you're like, oh no! Just like this next movie that I'm going to talk about, named Moon. This is one of my favorite movies of all time. It's been in my top 4 on Letterboxd for a while now, and I think this movie solidified Sam Rockwell as a really great actor. He's definitely underrated. The movie's about an astronaut named Sam Bell. He's been stationed on the moon for 3 years alongside an AI companion named Gertie. Unbeknownst to Sam, he's suffered quite a few accidents out there. The company employing him sends a bunch of clones up there, just keep the copies on standby, and when the 3 years is over, the current Sam is retired, killed off, and he's replaced with a new clone, and he wakes up from an accident that he had. The acting in this movie is so good. Sam Rockwell is amazing. When he discovers that he's a clone, it really is a mind-blowing experience. Even knowing the twist, watching this movie, it's worth it because Sam Rockwell's performance just makes it so much better. And his relationship with the AI, Gertie, is so good. But yeah, that's Moon. I might make a full-blown video on this movie in the future because I like it that much, but who knows. The next movie I'm going to be talking about is Oblivion. This is another one of those movies that isn't great, but for whatever reason, it just sticks out in my mind as one of the clone movies I've seen. Same with the movie The Sixth Day with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's a movie about him being cloned, and then he finds out that he's a clone, and then he gets replaced by the clone, and it's an interesting movie. Same with Oblivion. The film follows protagonist Jack, a drone repairman in the distant future after an alien apocalypse has driven most of the population into space. Jack eventually learns that everything he has known is a lie, when he discovers the supposed aliens he's been fighting are actually human survivors left on Earth. To make things even worse, it turns out that Jack is actually one of dozens of clones left on the planet. When Jack discovers this, he decides to give his bosses the ultimate resignation letter. I don't think this is an amazing movie, it's just another fun popcorn flick. I think most clone movies are fun popcorn flicks. If you guys know of any amazing clone movies, like Moon for example, let me know in the comment section down below. But yeah, they make for fun movies for the most part. Oh, this one is fun. I love simulation movies. Obviously, we're gonna start by talking about The Matrix. The big one, right? Everybody knows about The Matrix. One of the most popular sci-fi movies in existence. It's an extremely influential movie. I remember when I was really young and I watched The Matrix for the first time, I was absolutely blown away. The real world concept just blew my mind. I immediately rewatched it. I think I've seen The Matrix like 1,000 times. It's just one of those movies, right? There's so many iconic characters and scenes. Even the music in that movie is so good. Every character is so memorable in that movie. God, I can't gush about The Matrix enough. The effects were so good for the time. The movie is just oozing with creativity. So naturally, you have a lot of movies that just straight up copy The Matrix. They try to put their own spin on it, but it ends up just being terrible.
Wow.
Tron and Tron Legacy. Two insanely creative and amazing sci-fi movies. It's about these guys that are split into molecules by a digital laser and transported into a computer. This was one of the first times that a movie tried to digitally make an actor appear younger, so it doesn't look the best nowadays, but for the time it was pretty cool. Most of the other CGI is great though. Both of these movies have such incredible style. It's so easy to get lost in this world. It's such a unique and interesting take on what it would be like to live in the digital world. And those bikes, man, those bikes are so cool. There's also a show named Upload. It's set in the future when people's consciousness can be uploaded to a VR afterlife, and you have to continue to pay for things after you've died. So unless you're like a billionaire, then this is not something that is very feasible for you. It's a very interesting concept, and I think it's a relatively entertaining show. It's kind of goofy at points, and some of the humor is kind of lackluster, but overall, it's really fun to see how these people envisioned this future. The next movie I want to talk about is called Possessor. Definitely one of my favorite movies from 2020. It follows this woman named Tasia Voss. She's an assassin who takes control of others' bodies to carry out her hits. She's able to do this through an implant installed in the unwitting host's brain. She uses a special machine to insert her consciousness into their minds. She returns to her own body by forcing the host to commit suicide at the end of each job. Because she spends so much time imitating other people, she struggles with increasing detachment from her own identity and can't fully separate her work from her interactions with her husband and son. Because of her fragile mental state, during one of her assassination jobs, the person's body that she's trying to control starts to fight back. And a lot of the movie is about her inside this guy's body and his consciousness trying to push her out. And the imagery they use in this movie to portray that is so awesome. Another movie I want to talk about is called Source Code. It was released in 2011. The movie's about an army pilot captain that wakes up on a train going into Chicago. His name is Coulter Stevens. He's extremely disoriented, as his last memory was himself flying on a mission to Afghanistan. However, to the world around him, including his friend Christina Warren, and his own reflection in the train's windows, he appears to be a different man altogether. He expresses his confusion to Christina. The train then explodes, killing everyone on board. Stevens abruptly wakes up inside of a dimly lit cockpit. An Air Force captain verifies Stevens' identity and tells him of his mission to find the train bomber before sending him back to the moment he awoke on the train. Believing he is being tested in a simulation, Steven finds the bomb but is unable to identify the bomber before the train explodes. He eventually learns that the explosion actually happened and that it was merely the first attack of a suspected series, and it's his mission to identify the bomber before he or she kills more people. Later on, Steven eventually learns that he was reported as killed in action 2 months ago. He confronts his captain, who reveals that he is missing most of his body and is on life support and hooked up to neural sensors. The capsule and his healthy body are manifestations made by his mind to make sense of the environment. Overall, I thought it was a pretty fun movie. I liked that I didn't really know where it was going. It was one of those movies that kept me on the edge of my seat the entire time. There's some plot contrivances here and there, but overall I enjoyed it. I really like the idea of this tech that you can use to relive a moment over and over and over again in order to uncover a mystery. Another Matrix style movie is The 13th Floor. It's loosely based upon the novel Simulacron 3 by Daniel F. Galloy and a remake of the German film World on a Wire. Funny enough, The 13th Floor was nominated for the Saturn Award for Best Science Fiction Film, but lost to The Matrix. It's interesting because they both have so much in common. I guess the whole simulation thing was a hot topic at the time. The 13th Floor is more of a murder mystery type movie instead of a full-blown sci-fi like The Matrix, but I still thought it was relatively enjoyable. Probably one of my favorite simulation type movies is Dark City. It's a 1998 neo-noir science fiction film directed by Alex Proyas. The movie's about a man named John Murdoch. He awakens in a hotel bathtub, suffering from amnesia. Basically, the world is run by these alien beings called the Strangers. They have this secret home beneath the city, and it's always nighttime. In order to blend in amongst the humans, these aliens use corpses of human bodies as their hosts. They control a sort of hive mind. They're experimenting with humans to analyze their individuality in the hopes that some insight might be revealed that will help their own race survive. It's such a cool movie. From beginning to end, it just gets more eerie and creepy and mysterious. And then you start to learn what's going on and you're like, oh my God, what? And then there's this scene at the end and it's crazy. I love this movie so much. I remember watching it when I was a kid. I can't recommend this movie enough. It's great. There's Black Mirror episodes that toy with the whole simulation thing. More specifically, San Junipero, season 3, episode 4. It's about a simulated beach town where elder people can visit and deceased people can live with their younger selves' bodies. There's another episode called Playtest, season 3, episode 2. It's about this guy named Cooper who needs some extra money, so he looks for a short-term job. He finds a job with a video game company called Saito Gameu. This episode is terrifying and I hated it. Not because it's not good, but because the idea of it, it's so messed up. Some of the concepts that Black Mirror toys with really make my skin crawl. This is it, baby. Aliens. Yes, I love aliens. Can you tell? Let's go. You know what time it is. Alien time, baby. I am much shorter in my alien form.
Prophecy is true.
First off, I want to shout out Perfect Dark, a game that I grew up with and love dearly. Put some respect on Joanna Dark's name. Let's forget about Perfect Dark Zero. That game doesn't exist. The game's about this woman named Joanna Dark. She's like a female James Bond, basically, but it's set in the future in a sci-fi setting. Throughout the game, she uncovers the truths of Area 51. She eventually rescues an alien named Elvis. Yes, That's how I got the name Elvis the Alien. Now you guys know, and you can stop asking me, because you guys constantly ask me. Elvis is part of a friendly alien race called the Mayans. There's an evil alien race called the Skidar, and the Skidar have been manipulating powerful people on Earth, changing their form into humans so they can blend in. With the help of Elvis, you take on the Skidar. I played it again recently, and admittedly, it has a lot of problems. The level design is pretty bad, but there's still so much charm to it, and I am definitely looking forward to the new one, as long as it has nothing to do with Perfect Dark Zero. That game is just, oh God, it's so bad. I'm just gonna put Halo in the alien section because there's a lot of memorable alien species in Halo. I grew up with all those games and I have a huge fondness for all of them. But I have to say, Halo ODST is probably my favorite. The game is just dripping with atmosphere, and since you don't play as Master Chief, you feel exceptionally vulnerable. The music in the Halo games has gotta be some of the best music ever composed for a video game. I know the series hasn't been doing very well as of late, but I'm crossing my fingers for Halo Infinite. Hopefully it's good. And of course I have to mention the Alien movies. They're some of the most iconic sci-fi movies in existence, and you probably don't need me to explain them to you. Basically, it's about this badass woman named Ellen Ripley, and she kills aliens. In Alien, she fights one alien, and it's a really good movie. In Alien, she fights a bunch of aliens, and it's a really good movie. Alien 3 is, not that great. Just make sure you avoid alien resurrection at all costs. For those that like anime, there's obviously Neon Genesis Evangelion, The End of Evangelion, which is a really great animated flick.
Who's Joe? Who? Joe who? Joe. Who is Joe? Joe. Joe.
There's 10 Cloverfield Lane. I actually really like this movie. I know the ending was kind of controversial, but even with the ending, I still loved it. Everything that happens in the shelter alone is so well done, and the characters feel so real, and the acting is so good. I really enjoyed it a lot. One of the more classic Alien movies is Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's about these strange seeds that drift to Earth from space. Mysterious pods then grow. They invade San Francisco, California, where they replicate the residents into emotionless automatons. There's War of the Worlds, where we get to watch through the eyes of an American family as aliens invade Earth. The movie is a catastrophic nightmare to behold. It's based off of the science fiction novel by H.G. Wells. There's also Men in Black, which is probably one of my favorite Alien movies. It's kind of goofy, but it has a charm to it that's timeless. Obviously, you can't forget The Thing, where a research team in Antarctica is hunted by a shape-shifting alien.
10 crewmates have just discovered something over 100,000 years old. It was buried in the snow and ice.
Independence Day, obviously a classic.
The stupidest aliens in the universe attack the stupidest humans on Earth.
There's The X-Files, which I really loved as a kid. You follow Mulder and Scully. They fight the government in a conspiracy and find the truth about an alien colonization on Earth. There's District 9, which is about an alien species that lands on Earth. They're not inherently evil, but humans struggle to agree on the best ways to live with their newfound neighbors. And then later in the movie, this guy starts turning into one. It's kind of weird, but I remember really liking it. Got Arrival, dude. If you guys haven't seen Arrival, go see it. It's so good. In this movie, aliens don't come to Earth to destroy it, they come to warn us. But there's one huge problem. There's kind of a massive communication barrier. And how the hell do we bypass such a barrier? When we have little tiny human brains and we're talking to these super advanced creatures that have a language that is so far beyond our own that we can't even begin to comprehend it. It's such a fascinating movie. I love the soundtrack. If you go and listen to it, a lot of it is just like random mumblings, but produced in such a way where it sounds alien. The movie feels so grounded in reality, it really takes your breath away. Denis Villeneuve is an incredible director. I'm just saying, look out for Dune. The new Dune movie, it's gonna be great. I'm so excited. Another amazing movie is Under the Skin. It's a beautifully artistic take on an alien and human skin that seduces and lures unsuspecting people to their demise. I think this is probably my favorite role that Scarlett Johansson has ever been in. It's such a creepy, eerie movie. The way they portray people getting killed by this alien is so different and strange. When you're watching this movie, you can't look away. It's so captivating. Definitely one of my favorite alien movies of all time. There's Annihilation and Color Out of Space. They both kind of blend an alien invasion with cosmic horror. Annihilation is a movie based on a book about an alien force that covers a huge area of land. It shows perhaps the most terrifying of all extraterrestrial beings, and that's one that we can't see or touch and affects us in ways that we're unfamiliar with. When you're in contact with this thing, it rewrites your DNA, changing you from the inside. It's such an amazing movie. I loved it. Color Out of Space is not as deep, but it still touches on the same themes. It's about an asteroid that falls to Earth, and an alien force was within the asteroid, and it takes over this family's farm, and it starts affecting the family in very strange ways. Nicolas Cage does a great job in this movie. And of course, I have to talk about E.T. the Extraterrestrial. I think this was the first alien movie I've ever seen. It's about a boy befriending an alien that crashed on Earth, and throughout the movie we watch his struggle to keep it hidden from the government and his family. It's such a heartwarming movie. It's timeless. There's something about the character E.T. that will just live on forever. And then there's Paul. Remember the movie Paul? It's about a goofy alien man. He's funny and he smokes weed. I have to admit, I kind of like the movie Paul. Not my favorite alien movie by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought it was charming in its own way. I know it's not great, but for whatever reason, I kind of liked Paul. Now this is a big one, ladies and gentlemen. My favorite movies of all time are in this category. I love this simple question, what makes us human? And can something that was built by humanity ever truly be considered sentient? There are tons of examples in media that explore this question, the most obvious two being the Blade Runner movies. The first Blade Runner follows this man named Rick Deckard. It takes place in the year 2020. The world is in a pretty awful place. Animals almost entirely cease to exist, and they're all replaced with machine animals.
It's artificial?
Of course it is.
And there's these androids that exist, and they're called replicants, and they're indistinguishable from human beings. Deckard's job is to hunt down replicants and retire them, basically to kill them. Notice how even the wording dehumanizes them. Throughout the course of the film, Deckard learns that the newest model, the Nexus 6, that he's hired to hunt, have become much more advanced than what he's familiar with. By the end of the movie, he's saved by a replicant named Roy, a replicant that he was hired to kill. He's then forced to face his preconceptions of replicants. Basically, Roy is one of many replicants that travel to Earth to face their creator Tyrell in an attempt to prolong their measly 4-year lifespan. When they finally confront him, they hear that it's impossible, so then he kills Tyrell, effectively killing his god, which is not unlike how humans killed God, so to speak, with the advancement of science. In his final moments, Roy reflects on all of his amazing experiences. He understands that fighting Deckard is ultimately meaningless, because his real battle was with time, and that's a fight everyone must lose, replicant or human, and that might be the most human thing.
All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in rain.
In Blade Runner 2049, the protagonist Joe, who is a Nexus 9 replicant, is struggling with the idea that he lacks a soul, that he's not a living thing. Over the course of the movie, he learns that he may be more than just a replicant, that there might be purpose to his existence, that he might have been born and not made, and that his implanted memories might have been authentic, only to eventually realize that he was just another replicant all along. At the end, facing the reality that perhaps what it means to be human is realizing that you were never special to begin with, and that dying for a noble cause is the most any of us can hope to achieve. I think Blade Runner 2049 is probably my favorite movie of all time. Another movie directed by Denis Villeneuve, definitely one of my favorite directors, followed closely by Yorgos Lanthimos and Robert Eggers. From the moment you start Blade Runner 2049 to the moment it ends, it is just dripping with scenery. It has this aesthetic about it that is so undeniably beautiful, but also in a lot of ways depressing. The acting all around in this movie is incredible, and to think that Denis Villeneuve took a classic movie like Blade Runner and expanded upon the lore and the themes in such a way that he made a movie more impressive than a movie that was already a classic, it's insane. The cinematography is incredible. The sets that they use in this movie are just breathtaking. The effects are insane. Like, you gotta put your hands together for the people who edited this movie, because holy They did a good job. The color correction, everything is just so well done. It makes every single scene just drip with authenticity. And in a fully realized sci-fi world like this, it's super impressive. The movie transcends film. It brings you into the future. It's such an incredible experience. I remember sitting there after the movie ended and the credits were rolling. I was teary-eyed because it's not every day that you see a movie that incredible. Moving on, I'm going to be talking about a game that I love called Soma. This is one of my favorite video games of all time. It takes place in an underwater research facility. You play a man named Simon. He finds himself at the facility under mysterious circumstances and is inadvertently forced into uncovering its past while trying to make sense of his predicament and potential future. The game plays with the concept of reality and what makes something alive. Does it matter if we're living in a simulation? Is someone less human if their consciousness is held within something other than a human body?
Are you human?
Yeah, I'm human. Are you?
I love Deus Ex. I love the original. I loved Invisible War. The Fall was garbage. I even liked the newer games. I really liked Human Revolution, and I also liked Mankind Divided. I know some people didn't like Mankind Divided, but I still think it captures some of the essence of Deus Ex. While each game has its own distinct story, they all take place on Earth that has evolved into a dystopian cyberpunk society. The people you play as in these games, they all possess artificially acquired superhuman abilities or augmentations. The first game, and probably the game that I have the most fond memories with, you play as a character named JC Denton. There's some critical choices that you make throughout the game that are really interesting. For a game so old, it's super impressive the amount of choice and freedom that they give you. I think that's why I remember it so fondly. Another game that I like a lot is Detroit Become Human. You play as a bunch of different characters in this game. One of them is Connor, a detective android. As you play throughout the game, it deviates from its programming and learns to empathize like a human. The androids in this game gain sentience and start a revolution against mankind for equal rights. There's a TV show called Humans. It's very similar to Detroit Become Human in a lot of ways. In this show, however, the androids are distinguishable from humans because they're given different colored eyes. Something I found interesting about the show is that there's a young human girl who disliked the flaws of humanity so much and admired the seemingly unproblematic life of synths, so she put in contacts and pretended to be a synth as a way to shield herself from humanity. Another very impressive show, as far as the first couple seasons are concerned anyway, is Westworld. The main season revolves around this park called Westworld, where you can go and visit the old frontier as it once was, and the park is full of hosts, or androids who are indistinguishable from humans. They can be toyed with by the guests however they please. So it's basically just a big playground for these rich people to act as terrible as they want without any repercussions. They can kill the androids or worse. The androids then have their memories wiped, they're cleaned, and then reinstated the following day. One of the androids' creators had a different idea for them. His plan all along was to get them to become sentient.
We can't define consciousness because consciousness does not exist. Humans fancy that there's something special about the way we perceive the world, and yet we live in loops as tight and as closed as the hosts do.
There's this really cool sci-fi show on Netflix called Love, Death, and Robots. The episodes range wildly in quality and genre. Some are sci-fi, some are comedies, some are fantasy. There's one about yogurt that takes over the world. Yeah, it's weird. I remember really liking the episodes The Witness, Zima Blue, Sunny's Edge, 3 Robots, Suits, and Beyond the Aquila Rift. I gotta mention the Portal games, probably the best puzzle games of all time. You're led through a series of dangerous tests by a robot named GLaDOS. I honestly think this game is partly a comedy because the writing is so good for GLaDOS. She's just constantly hurling insults at you, it's hilarious.
Good news. I figured out what to do with all the money I saved recycling your one room full of air. When you die, I'm going to laminate your skeleton and pose you in the lobby. That way future generations can learn from you how not to have your unfortunate bone structure.
And for all you weebs out there, Nier Automata, baby! You play as a combat android named 2B. It's a really fun game. The best thing about this game is the music. Oh my god, it's so good. If you never play this game, at least listen to the soundtrack. It's amazing.
I often think about the god who blessed us with this cryptic puzzle, and wonder if we'll ever have the chance to kill him.
There's a really awesome movie called Artificial Intelligence. It was directed by Steven Spielberg. You can kind of think of it as like the Pinocchio of the future.
You're a machine.
I'm a boy. My name is David.
It's about a robot boy that goes on an adventure to become a real boy after he's dumped on the side of the road by his mother. Jude Law's in this movie, and he plays this sex robot. It's really weird. There's one scene in particular that's memorable to me. There's a sort of carnival show that the boy ends up at, where people destroy sentient robots to entertain a live audience. And as a viewer, it's kind of sad watching this because this seems like something that could definitely happen in the future. And of course, I have to talk about one of my favorite animes of all time, Ghost in the Shell. It's about this woman who is mostly android aside from her mind, named Major Motoko. She deals with a similar identity crisis as Joe from Blade Runner 2049, except Major had a terrible accident befall her as a child that ultimately required her to use a full-body prosthesis to house her cyber brain. This high level of cyberization opens the brain up to attacks from highly skilled hackers. I normally really don't like live-action adaptations of anime, but the Ghost in the Shell starring Scarlett Johansson, I have a soft spot for. I thought she was great for the role. While it's not nearly as good as the anime, I still think it's a fun movie, and I really do think that Scarlett Johansson successfully brought Major to life. I think the live-action movie is a comfort movie for me.
Section 9 is currently on site. Repeat. All patrolling area units be advised.
This is Major. I'm on site.
Obviously, I have to mention the Fallout games. These games show us an alternate reality more than a glimpse into the future, but they still do a lot of creative things with robots and technology. I remember really liking the Fallout 4 DLC Far Harbor. In this DLC, you are given the task to preserve the balance of power between the citizens of Far Harbor and a cult called the Children of Adam. There's a safe haven for synths named Acadia, and they're simultaneously trying to keep the peace between Far Harbor and the Children of Adam, but it's getting more and more difficult. These three factions hate each other for some reason or another, and it's your goal to try and make them see reason. Or not. You can always just go insane and kill things, but, you know. That's Fallout. And it's a really cool DLC, but I hate these puzzle sections. You're supposed to be like inside a computer uncovering a secret about one of the synths, but it's just not fun. The rest of the DLC is great though, but nothing will beat Fallout New Vegas. What an amazing game that is. There's some really awesome videos by the Act Man and H Bomber guy about this game, so if you want to know why it's so awesome, go check them out. It's always funny to me when you watch a movie like Blade Runner, for instance, and there's not a cell phone in sight because it wasn't a tech that was popular at the time when they made the movie. So it'll be interesting to see how modern sci-fi movies age. If you're looking for some really cool time travel content, obviously there's the Terminator movies, there's the movie and show 12 Monkeys, obviously Back to the Future, and one of my favorite shows, Dark. Sometimes you watch content that's so complex that you have to keep like a wiki on hand of the characters and where they're from and everything. Well, that is definitely the case with this show Dark, but not in a bad way. It can get a little bit convoluted at times, but with the type of story they're trying to tell, it's kind of impossible not to get convoluted, but it's done in such a way that you remain invested in these characters. The way they use time travel in this show is so ingenious. Another great time travel movie is Primer. It's kind of confusing when you watch it at first, but if you take the time to understand it, it's worth it. If you're more into anime, then I suggest you watch Steins Gate. It's a really cool take on time travel. I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff that I forgot, but yeah, I just wanted to spend some time and just talk about some movies and shows and games that I love. Obviously, I can't touch on literally everything in the sci-fi genre. That'd be ridiculous. I tried my best to talk about the classics, but also my favorites and some that stood out to me in my lifetime. I want this to be kind of a discussion, so in the comment section down below, feel free to recommend me anything that I might not have discussed, something I might not be aware of, because I'm always looking for new content that's kind of similar to this stuff. There's tons of movies and games that I haven't watched or played that I definitely want to. One of the games I want to play, for example, is Elite Dangerous. I hear it's awesome, but I just haven't done it yet. Anyway, I'm gonna stop rambling. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it to the end, I'm very impressed. Wow. Check out alienclothing.com if you haven't already. Thank you so much to all my patrons that make videos like this possible, and I'll see you guys in the next one.